The hospital room on the 7th floor of Mahdi Military Hospital looked south across the Nile. The curtains were drawn. It was just before dawn on the 27th of July, 1980, and the man in the bed was 60 years old. A splenectomy incision ran across his abdomen, still healing from the operation Michael DeBakey's team had performed 4 months earlier in Cairo. A subphrenic abscess had formed beneath the diaphragm. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma had transformed into a more aggressive variant the French hematologist Georges Flandrin would later describe as Richter's transformation. The man had been dying for 6 years. He had been in exile for 18 months. He had been the king of kings of Iran, light of the Aryans, shadow of God on earth for 37 years. His wife sat beside the bed. His 14-year-old son was in the room. His 17-year-old daughter was somewhere in the Kuba Palace complex. His 10-year-old daughter had been sent to Alexandria 2 days earlier and was not permitted into the hospital. His 19-year-old son was on a plane from Cairo International, a flight that would not land in time. His eldest daughter, 40 years old, was in Geneva and had not seen her father in nearly 2 years. At some point before sunrise, according to the account his wife would give in her memoir 24 years later, he spoke his final documented sentence. His voice was thin. The line carried in the language of a dying man who had spent his life in ceremonial sentences, something close to a confession. He said that his spleen weighed him down heavier than the crown. A few minutes later, his breathing changed. The monitor registered what the monitor always registers. At 9:45 in the morning, Cairo time, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi was pronounced dead. The peacock throne had been occupied in one lineage or another for 2,500 years. Cyrus the Great had founded the first Persian Empire in the 6th century before Christ. Darius had ruled from Persepolis. The Safavids had built Isfahan. The Qajars had lost the provinces. And on the morning of the 27th of July, 1980, in a hospital room above the Nile, the last king of the line died of an untreated cancer in a country not his own, leaving behind a wife who had no country to return to and 5 children who had inherited nothing but the name. The youngest daughter, 10 years old, barred from the room in Alexandria, would live 21 more years before a hotel housekeeper in London found her body. The second son, the scholar, would live 30 more years before a Boston police unit responded to a 911 call at 2:11 in the morning. The elder son would spend the next 46 years trying to finish what a dying man had asked him to continue. The middle daughter would disappear into a Manhattan apartment and almost never speak in public again. And the eldest daughter, born to a different mother, separated from her at the age of 5 by a royal divorce decree, would walk into a kind of silence that by the year 2026 would stretch to 47 unbroken years. This is the story of what happened to the children of the last Shah of Iran. 2 days after his death, on the 29th of July, 1980, Cairo gave the Shah of Iran what his own country would not. The procession formed at sunrise outside the Abdeen Palace. 6 black horses drew the caisson. Behind the casket, wrapped in the tricolour of Imperial Iran, walked President Anwar Sadat of Egypt in a black suit and dark glasses, his chief of mourners. Behind Sadat walked Richard Nixon, the former American president, who had flown to Cairo on his own initiative after Jimmy Carter had scribbled a handwritten refusal on a State Department telegram ordering the American ambassador not to attend the service and the American flag not to be flown. Beside Nixon walked Constantine II, the exiled king of Greece, another monarch without a country. The route ran approximately 2 kilometres through the centre of Cairo under a sky that had already reached 38 degrees Celsius by 9 in the morning. Egyptian state television estimated 100,000 people lining the boulevards. The procession terminated at Al-Rifai Mosque on Saladin Square. A 21-gun salute was fired. The anthem of Imperial Iran, a song no longer performed by any state on earth, was played by an Egyptian military band. The casket was carried through the arched doorway into the mausoleum chamber, where Egyptian royalty had been interred for generations. Al-Rifai holds the dead of 3 fallen dynasties. The Khedives of Egypt are here. King Farouk, deposed by Nasser's free officers in 1952, is buried in a marble tomb near the Qibla wall. Reza Shah Pahlavi, the Shah's father, was laid in this mosque from 1944 until 1950, before his body was repatriated to Iran and interred in the Grand Mausoleum at Ray. The mausoleum Ayatollah Khalkhali would order demolished in April of 1980. Reza Shah's remains were never recovered from the rubble. Now 30 years after his father had lain in this same building, Mohammad Reza was laid in a green draped tomb in the corner of the room under a framed photograph of himself in dress uniform, beside the graves of a dynasty that had also been erased by a revolution in its own capital. I covered Queen Farida of Egypt in a recent video. Farida was Farouk's first wife. After her divorce and her husband's overthrow, she lived on a modest pension in a 2-bedroom apartment in Madi and developed a painting technique using gouache and molten metal worked with a blowtorch, which she exhibited at the Grand Palais in Paris. What I did not explore in that video is that Al-Rifai Mosque, where her ex-husband is buried, is the same mosque where Reza Shah Pahlavi was interred for 6 years and where Mohammad Reza Shah was buried in 1980. 2 fallen Middle Eastern royal houses, 2 fallen capitals, 1 Cairo stone. The Iranian state responded to the funeral within hours. The front page of the Tehran Times on the 30th of July carried a single line beneath the photograph of the procession. The line read that the vampire of the century was dead. The Islamic Republic of Iran had been declared on the 1st of April 1979. The American hostage crisis at the embassy in Tehran had been running for 267 days. The Shah's name had been scraped from public buildings, from textbooks, from street signs. His portrait had been torn from the walls of every school and every ministry. His statues had been pulled down with cranes and with ropes. By the time his casket reached the tomb at Al-Rifai, nothing physical in his own country carried his image any longer. But he had left 5 children. The throne was gone. The children remained. The eldest was born on the 27th of October 1940 in a private wing of Sa'adabad Palace in the hills above Tehran. Her father was still Crown Prince at the time. Her grandfather, Reza Shah, received the news of a granddaughter with a rage that the court diarists recorded carefully and the family recorded quietly. Reza Shah had wanted a grandson, an heir, a continuation of the line he had founded only 15 years earlier. He had not wanted a girl. Her mother, Princess Fawzia of Egypt, was 19 years old, the daughter of King Fuad I and the sister of King Farouk, and had been married to Mohammad Reza for 18 months. She'd been photographed for Life magazine by Cecil Beaton the previous year and described as one of the most beautiful women in the world. She was already, at the time of her daughter's birth, deeply unhappy in Tehran. The child was named Shahnaz. The marriage did not survive. In May of 1945, Fawzia returned to Cairo on what was described as a visit for her health and did not come back. In her absence, Mohammad Reza ascended the throne. His father had been forced to abdicate by the British and the Soviets in September of 1941. He was now the King of Kings, and his wife was living in her brother's palace in Alexandria, 1,800 miles away. The Iranian divorce was formalized on the 17th of November, 1948. The decree contained a clause that defined Shahnaz's childhood. The 5-year-old princess was to remain in Iran. The official reason given to the international press was that the Persian climate had endangered her mother's health, and the Iranian climate agreed with the child. The actual reason was that Shahnaz was a Pahlavi, a princess of the blood, and under no circumstance would the Iranian court permit her to be raised in Cairo as a daughter of the Muhammad Ali dynasty. She was raised in Sa'adabad by her father, by his sisters Princess Ashraf and Princess Shams, and by a rotation of European governesses. She was sent to the Lycée Léonie de Waha in Liège, and later to the Institut Marie-José in Switzerland. Her mother was permitted to see her during the summers in Switzerland. The court diaries of Asadollah Alam, who was the Shah's closest political confidant and kept a private journal for 20 years, describe Shahnaz in her adolescence as reserved and melancholic. Alam noted that after the Shah's third marriage to Farah in 1959, and after the birth of a son and heir in 1960, Shahnaz receded further. She was no longer the only child. She was no longer the daughter of the reigning queen. She was the daughter of an Egyptian princess who had left Iran and had never come back. On the 11th of October 1957, at the age of 16, Shahnaz was married in the Mirror Hall of Golestan Palace in Tehran to Ardashir Zahedi, the 29-year-old son of the general who had helped restore her father to the throne during the coup of 1953. The Shah reportedly ordered a simple ceremony, remarking that it was no pride to be king of a poor and hungry people. A State Department memo of the period noted that any son born to Shahnaz and Zahedi would likely become the most credible claimant to the Iranian throne. On the 2nd of December 1958, Shahnaz gave birth to a daughter, Zahra Mana Zahedi, the Shah's first grandchild. 2 years later, the birth of her half-brother Reza in 1960 rendered the succession question moot. Shahnaz and Zahedi divorced in 1964. She was 24 years old. In February of 1971, at the Iranian embassy in Paris, Shahnaz married a second time. The ceremony was held without her father's approval, which meant it was held without the presence of anyone from the imperial court. Her second husband was Khosrow Jahanbani, a Qajar-descended artist, the youngest son of General Amanullah Jahanbani. Khosrow's elder brother, Lieutenant General Nader Jahanbani, was the deputy commander of the Iranian Air Force. On the 13th of March 1979, 3 weeks after the revolution, Nader Jahanbani was executed by firing squad on the orders of a revolutionary tribunal chaired by Sadegh Kalkali. Shahnaz and Khosrow had 2 children together, a son, Ki Khosrow, born on the 20th of November 1971, and a daughter, Fawzia, born in 1973 and named for the Egyptian grandmother her mother had barely known. Sometime in the mid-1970s, in the final years of her father's reign, Shahnaz underwent a religious transformation that scandalized the court. She took the religious name Hajar, the Arabic name for Hagar, and began wearing a headscarf at private gatherings. Persian language sources refer to her in this period as the veiled daughter of the Shah. She was not a convert to another faith. She was a devout Shia Muslim inside a family whose political program depended on the marginalization of the clergy. Her father, whose white revolution had been opposed by Ayatollah Khomeini, whose vision of Iran was secular and modernizing and oriented toward the West, now had a daughter in a headscarf praying in a palace that would be seized by the men whose theology she had adopted. Shahnaz and Khosrow were in Switzerland when Tehran fell. She had been living primarily abroad for years. She held Swiss citizenship. She did not participate in the family's long exile route through Morocco and the Bahamas, and Mexico and Panama and Cairo. She did not attend her father's deathbed in Mahdi. She did not attend his funeral at Al-Rifa'i. When her mother died in Alexandria on the 2nd of July 2013 at the age of 91, Shahnaz received Egyptian citizenship in addition to her Swiss and Iranian papers. In April of 2014, her husband Khosrow died of cancer in Geneva. She was widowed at 73. In April of 2026, Shahnaz Pahlavi is 85 years old. She lives in Geneva. She has given no interviews, she has published no memoir, she has issued no political statement. She has not appeared in public in any documented capacity in approximately 2 decades. She is the last living bridge between the Pahlavi dynasty of Iran and the Muhammad Ali dynasty of Egypt. She is the only surviving child of the Shah's first marriage. And for 47 years, since the day Iran fell, she has said nothing. The second child was the first son. He was born on the 31st of October, 1960, in a maternity hospital in Tehran that would be renamed for his mother within the year. His birth was treated as a state event. The Shah pardoned 98 political prisoners. A 20% reduction in income tax was decreed by imperial order. Bells were rung in Tehran churches. Salutes were fired from the citadel. A 101-gun salute announced the arrival of the Crown Prince from the military barracks at Cairo. The Shah had waited 20 years for a male heir. 2 previous marriages had failed to produce one. Farahnaz, his 22-year-old third wife, had now produced one within 11 months of the wedding. The child was named Reza after his grandfather. He was raised inside Niavaran Palace. A French governess taught him French before Persian. He attended the Reza Pahlavi school built on the palace grounds. He was captain of the school soccer team. On the 26th of October 1967, at the age of 6, he stood in Golestan Palace in a miniature military uniform as his father placed the imperial crown on his own head. And then, for the first time in Iranian history, placed a crown on the head of a reigning queen. Farah Pahlavi became Shahbanu, a title no consort of a Persian king had worn before. Reza was proclaimed crown prince on the same day. At the age of 13, in 1973, Reza began flight training at Dezful Air Base in the southwest of Iran. In 1977, at 16, he completed his first solo flight in an American-built F-5 fighter. The Iranian press described him as the country's youngest qualified fighter pilot. In the summer of 1978, as the first anti-Shah demonstrations spread through Iranian cities, his father sent him to the United States to continue his military training. He arrived at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas in the autumn of 1978 and transferred to Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock, Texas, shortly afterward. He was at Reese on the 16th of January 1979 when his parents' Boeing 707 lifted off from Mehrabad International Airport. His father, according to the account Farah gave later, bent down at the foot of the aircraft stairs and picked up a handful of Iranian soil and placed it in a small container that he carried with him onto the plane. His mother stood beside him, weeping. The crew saluted. The plane climbed out over Tehran at 3:15 in the afternoon local time and banked west toward Aswan, where Anwar Sadat was waiting at the airport. Reza watched the departure on an American television in Lubbock. The New York Times photographed him the following day with Iranian generals at a motel in West Texas. He was 18 years old. He would not see his father again for 17 months and would not see his country of birth again at all. In September of 1979, he enrolled as a freshman at Williams College in northwestern Massachusetts, having been admitted after the Dean of Admissions, Philip Smith, consulted privately with the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Richard Helms. He arrived on campus in a motorcade of 3 black limousines accompanied by Iranian generals and security officers. He stayed at Williams for 1 academic year. He didn't return. He attended the American University in Cairo briefly. He completed a Bachelor of Science degree in political science through correspondence courses from the University of Southern California in 1985. He lived for the first 4 years of his exile in the Kuba Palace in Cairo, a property Sadat had provided to the Pahlavi family at no cost. On the 31st of October 1980, his 20th birthday and the date of his constitutional majority under the Iranian Constitution of 1906, Reza Pahlavi walked into a reception hall at Kuba Palace and read a 10-minute statement into a microphone connected to a Cairo radio station. He was wearing a dark suit and a black tie. His mother sat in the front row. His sister Leila, 10 years old, sat beside her. His statement, delivered in Persian and then in English, included the declaration that, in accordance with the Iranian constitution and its amendments, he was assuming the responsibilities of the lawful king of Iran as of that date. He said he could understand and sympathize with the sufferings and inner torment of his people. He said he shed the tears they had to hide. He said there was, he was sure, light beyond the darkness. United Press International, reporting from Cairo, noted that the Crown Prince was fighting back tears throughout the broadcast. The United States Department of State issued a statement the following afternoon, declining to recognize the proclamation. No state on earth recognized it. He was, from the moment he finished speaking, a king in ceremonial form only, a sovereign without a government, without a territory, without a recognized title under any international instrument. On the 12th of June, 1986, he married Yasmin Etemad Amini at a private ceremony in Greenwich, Connecticut. She was 17. He was 25. She would later earn a Juris Doctor from George Washington University and found the Foundation for the Children of Iran in 1991. They would have 3 daughters. Noor Zara, born on the 3rd of April 1992 in Washington, District of Columbia. Iman Laya, born on the 12th of September 1993, and Farah Mitra, born on the 17th of January 2004. Reza and Yasmin settled in Potomac, Maryland, an affluent suburb approximately 15 miles northwest of the White House, where they still reside. The institutions he was nominally inheriting had ceased to exist. The Pahlavi Foundation, which before the revolution had controlled 17 banks, 80% of Iran's largest insurance company, 25 metal manufacturing firms, 45 construction companies, 43 food producers, 8 mining operations, and roughly 70% of the country's hotel rooms had been seized in March of 1979 and absorbed into the Bonyad Mostazafan, the Islamic Republic's foundation of the oppressed. The Iranian crown jewels, including the Darya-e-Noor pink diamond and the peacock throne itself, remained in the vault of the Central Bank of Iran in Tehran, where they are displayed to this day as the physical reserve backing the Iranian rial. Every reference to the Pahlavi family has been removed from the display captions. The objects remain. The name is erased. If you are still with me 20 minutes into a story about what it means to inherit a country that no longer exists and a name that has been scraped from its own buildings, I would be grateful if you took a second to subscribe. The channel covers royal families after their collapse, and the research behind each of these scripts takes weeks. Your subscription is what keeps the work possible. For the first 2 decades of his exile, Reza styled himself as the legitimate constitutional monarch of Iran in waiting. By the mid-2000s, he had begun to shift his position. In his book, Winds of Change, published by Renery in 2002, he argued for a national referendum on Iran's future system of government. The referendum would, he conceded, potentially result in the abolition of the institution he was proposing to head. In a second book, published in Persian in 2000 and in French in 2009, he went further. His daughter Noor, to whom he has designated succession rights, has said publicly that stepping into political advocacy is not a choice for her, but a legacy. The designation of Noor as heir is itself a break from the Constitution of 1906, which required a male heir. In September of 2022, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman named Mahsa Amini died in the custody of the morality police in Tehran. The protests that followed were the largest internal challenge to the Islamic Republic since its founding. Reza Pahlavi, at 61, became one of the most visible diaspora voices in the movement. He issued the Mahsa Charter in March of 2023. He launched an opposition coalition that collapsed within 2 months. Between the 16th and the 20th of April 2023, he made a formal visit to Israel as a guest of the intelligence minister Gira Gamliel, attending Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremonies at Yad Vashem alongside Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog, visiting the Western Wall in Jerusalem and visiting the Baha'i Gardens in Haifa. He described a future diplomatic framework between a post-clerical Iran and Israel as a potential successor to the Abraham Accords. On the 22nd of October 2024, the Nixon Foundation awarded him its Architect of Peace Award at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, California. In his acceptance remarks, he noted that when his father had been forced into exile in 1979, the world had been quick to turn its back, but that one man had remained. That man, he said, was President Nixon. In the summer of 2025, during a 12-day military confrontation between Israel and Iran, he publicly endorsed the Israeli air campaign against Iranian nuclear facilities as what he called a humanitarian intervention against the regime of Ali Khamenei. He called it Iran's Berlin Wall moment at a press conference in Paris. In February of 2026, Ayatollah Khamenei was reported killed in a joint American-Israeli strike. On the 1st of March 2026, Reza Pahlavi gave a 60-minute interview to Scott Pelley from a studio in Paris. Asked about his father on camera, he repeated a line he has repeated in interviews for decades. He said his father had told him that a king did not build his throne on the blood of his own people. Asked whether he intended to become king himself, he said he was not running for office. He said the Iranian people trusted him as a transitional leader, not as the future king, not as the future president, not as the future anything. He is 65 years old. He has not set foot in Iran since the summer of 1978. He has 4 living siblings and has buried 2 of them, and the countries in which he has buried them are not the country he represents. The second child of Farah and the Shah was born on the 12th of March 1963 in a private wing of the same Tehran hospital where her elder brother had been born. She was given the name Farahnaz, meaning the grace of Farah, a construction in Persian that linked the daughter's name to the mother's in a single compound. In the family photographs of the 1960s and 1970s, she appears beside her brother Reza in nearly identical poses, hair dark, eyes serious, hands folded. The court photographers arranged the children by height and age. Reza in the centre, Farahnaz to his right, the younger children filling in the edges as they arrived. She attended the Niavaran Special School on the palace grounds, the same private institution her brother attended from 1970 until the family's departure in 1978. She was 15 years old when her father flew to Aswan. She had been sent ahead of the family to the United States and was enrolled at the Ethel Walker School, a boarding school for girls in Simsbury, Connecticut, from 1978 through 1980. When her father died in Cairo in July of 1980, she was in the Kuba Palace complex with the rest of the family, 17 years old, and had already been separated from her country for nearly 2 years. She enrolled at Bennington College in Vermont for her undergraduate studies, graduating in the early 1980s. She moved to New York and completed a graduate degree at the Columbia University School of Social Work in 1990, with a specialization in child psychology. Her stated intention, according to interviews her mother would give later, was to work with children in vulnerable circumstances. She applied for positions at the United Nations Children's Fund and at other international relief organizations. According to a Los Angeles Times report from 2004, she was turned away from multiple agencies because of her name. The concern raised internally at several organizations was that hiring a daughter of the last Shah of Iran would compromise the neutrality of the agency's operations in the Middle East. No documentation of a specific rejection has ever been made public. The outcome is that Farahnaz never held a position at any of the institutions her education had been designed for. She has never married. She has no children. She has given no extended public interview. She has not written a memoir. She has not run a foundation in her own name. In a January 2011 report, the Daily Best cited an unnamed family friend who stated that Farahnaz suffered from depression. The attribution has never been confirmed by Farahnaz herself and has not been repeated by family members on the record. She lives, according to most reports, in Manhattan, in an apartment that has never been photographed for a society publication, in a building that has never been named in print. She appears in the public record on 2 documented occasions. On the 17th of June 2001, she stood at the Cimetière de Passy in the 16th arrondissement of Paris during the funeral of her younger sister. She is visible in photographs behind her mother, wearing dark clothing and large sunglasses. She did not speak during the ceremony. She would stand again at her brother's memorial service exactly 10 years after her sister's. On the 23rd of January 2011, Getty Images photographed her at the Music Center at Strathmore in Bethesda, Maryland, standing behind Crown Prince Reza and her mother at the memorial service for her brother Ali Reza. Again, she didn't speak. She signed the family statement that was released after his death. In April of 2026, Farah Pahlavi was 63 years old. She is the only surviving full sibling of her brother Reza. She is reportedly in contact with her mother in Paris and with her brother in Potomac. She has begun appearing very occasionally at Iranian solidarity rallies in European capitals, including a demonstration in Munich in the spring of 2025. She does not give speeches. She stands near the back. The photographs are low resolution and frequently uncredited. She is the family's silent witness, the sister who was raised to be a princess of a dynasty that ceased to exist before she turned 17, the trained child psychologist who was never permitted to practice, the middle daughter who has spent 47 years almost entirely outside public view. Her education was pointed toward a life of charitable work inside the Iranian state. The state disappeared. The vocation did not translate. She kept training and absorbed the silence. The third child of Farah and the Shah, and the second son, was born on the 28th of April, 1966, in Tehran. The Pahlavi family's own commemorative website lists his birth date as the 28th of July. Every other contemporary record, including the hospital register, the palace birth announcement, and the certified genealogies, gives the date as April. The family's own archive misremembers the birthday of a son they would mourn for the rest of their lives. He was named Ali Reza, after the Shia Imam Ali, and after his grandfather. He was the family's heir presumptive from his brother Reza's proclamation as Shah in 1980 until his own death in 2011. He was a quiet child. His mother's memoir describes him as curious, humorous, loyal to a small circle of friends, uninterested in court ceremonies. He obtained a private pilot's license at the age of 12. He skydived, he scuba dived. His elder brother was a fighter pilot. Ali Reza flew light aircraft alone in silence at low altitudes over open country. His education, after the family's exile, became a migration pattern. He attended the Lycée Razi in Tehran until he was 12, the Reza Pahlavi School on the palace grounds for a brief period, St. David's School in Manhattan after the family reached New York, the American College in Cairo during the months his parents spent at Cuba, and Mount Greylock Regional High School in Williamstown, Massachusetts, where he graduated in the mid-1980s. He entered Princeton University and completed a Bachelor of Arts in Music with a specialization in ethnomusicology in 1988. The family's website incorrectly lists the year as 1984. He enrolled at Columbia University and earned a Master of Arts in Ancient Iranian Studies in 1992 under the supervision of Professor Ehsan Yarshata, the founder of the Encyclopedia Iranica. He then entered Harvard University as a doctoral candidate in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations, with a research focus in Avestan philology and the pre-Islamic history of Iran. He never finished the dissertation. Harvard confirmed to the Associated Press on the 5th of January 2011 that he had not been enrolled at the time of his death. He had been a candidate for approximately 15 years. His research subject, the subject he had chosen for his professional life, was the civilization that had preceded the Islamic conquest of Persia in Farsakhs, the 7th century. The Achaemenid kings, Darius and Xerxes, the Sasanian kings, the Avesta and the Old Persian cuneiform inscriptions, the script, the language, the religion, the imperial structure, the royal ideology of a Persia that had existed 1,000 years before the arrival of the tradition whose revolutionary descendants had taken his family's throne. Professor Yarshata told the Associated Press after his death that Ali Reza had been interested in two fields, specifically the history of pre-Islamic Iran and the culture and languages of Iran prior to Islam. He was studying for 15 unfinished years the 2,500-year monarchy his father had been the last man to wear. He lived in Boston. His home was a 3-story row house at 141 West Newton Street in the South End. He purchased the property in the late 1990s. Neighbours interviewed by Boston Magazine and by the Boston Globe after his death described him as unsocial in a way that was neither rude nor shy, merely distant. He drove a Porsche. He was usually in jeans and a blazer. He spoke to the couple next door roughly once a year. He was a Freemason, raised in December of 1991 at Kane Lodge No. 454 in New York City. He served as vice chairman at a private investment firm called Armour and Company. He was also listed in the New York Times paid death notice as a counselor to the firm. In 2010, he became engaged to an Iranian-American woman named Raha Didavar. She was in her early 30s. She had been a professional photographer. The engagement was not publicly announced. Few outside the family knew of it. Ali Reza had been described by nearly everyone who knew him well as carrying something that did not move. Abbas Milani, who wrote the definitive biography of the Shah, described Ali Reza in a comment to the Associated Press as having inherited an embryonic melancholy from his father. Milani said he was like a jilted lover, someone who had put all of his life into a woman or a man and had now been left by her or him. The thing that had been taken from him, in Milani's formulation, was not a person, but a country, and the grief of it had been present in him since adolescence. His friend Fadia Pass, interviewed from Paris after his death, said he had gone into a deep depression following the death of his sister Leila in June of 2001, and that he had never recovered. She said he had become a different person after his sister's death. She said that for 10 years he had been, in her words, a different person. He had spent those 10 years studying the dead language of a dead empire in a house in Boston, in a fellowship program he couldn't complete, preparing for a future that would have required a country that no longer admitted his name. The fourth and final child of Farah and the Shah was born on Friday the 27th of March 1970 at the military hospital in Tehran. Her name Leila means night in Arabic. The Shah was 50 years old. The hospital was renamed for her within the same day. She was the last child. Her mother would have no more. Her father, who had been told by his doctors not long before that he had a form of cancer for which there would be no cure, held his newborn daughter in the delivery room and, according to an account Farah gave in her memoir 34 years later, wept. Leila was raised inside Nayavaran Palace during the final 9 years of the monarchy. Her bedroom looked onto a courtyard garden where, according to photographs later reproduced by the family, her father walked most mornings. On one wall hung a framed, signed photograph of Jimmy Carter and his 8-year-old daughter Amy, sent from the White House during the Carter administration. The royal children had a private zoo on the palace grounds, stocked over the years with deer, antelope, monkeys, a lion, and an Indian elephant that had been a gift from Indira Gandhi. Leila's governess took her to the zoo most afternoons. In a French magazine interview she gave in 1999, at the age of 29, she described her childhood relationship with her father in language that was unusually direct for a Pahlavi. She said that even when she was only 3, he would take her by the hand when he went to meet foreign dignitaries. She said that every day she would go and find him in his office, even if he was in the middle of a meeting. She said that every morning he used to ask her to pray for rain for the benefit of the country's farmers. Her mother, in a passage in the memoir addressed to Leila directly, described her as daring, a tomboy, a good swimmer and rider and cyclist. Farah wrote that she could never bear it when the governess took Leila away from her. In the 1978 family photographs, the last summer the family would spend in Iran, Leila is 8 years old, in a sundress, on a pony at the now Shah estate on the Caspian coast. She is laughing. She was flown out of Iran ahead of her parents in the first week of January 1979, in the care of her paternal grandmother. Her parents followed on the 16th. The first stop on the exile route for Leila was not Aswan but Lubbock, Texas, where her brother Reza was still in American military training and where she spent approximately 2 weeks at a West Texas motel with Iranian generals and American security officers before being reunited with her parents in Morocco. She was 8 years old. She would tell a journalist 20 years later that she remembered almost nothing of the journey except one thing. She said she came out with nothing. She said, "Thank God the governess brought the photo albums." The family's movements between January of 1979 and July of 1980 traced the shape of a refusal. Morocco turned them away in March. The Bahamas expelled them in June. Mexico admitted them in Cuernavaca, and then, under pressure from the revolutionary government in Tehran, declined to renew their visas. The United States admitted the Shah for cancer treatment at New York Hospital Cornell in October of 1979, and within weeks, militants had stormed the American embassy in Tehran and taken 66 American hostages. Leila moved with her mother between hotels in Panama and hospital waiting rooms in New York. A family friend, quoted in a Vanity Fair profile after her death, described a recurring scene from those months. Her mother would telephone every night. Leila, 9 years old, would cry into the receiver. She would scream, "Where are you? I want to see Daddy." The family reached Cairo in March of 1980. Her father died at Mahdi on the 27th of July. Leila had been sent to Alexandria 2 days earlier in the care of relatives. She was not permitted into the hospital room as her father was dying. She was not permitted to see his body before the funeral. She was 10 years old. A family friend present in Cairo during those days told the Irish Times in 2001 that at the state funeral on the 29th of July, Leila stood in the mourning procession in a white dress and was, in the friend's words, so quiet, so tranquil, so unbothered by all the fuss and the commotion around her. It was an almost unreal calm. The friend noted that the calm had not broken for days. In the 1999 magazine interview she gave in Paris, 19 years after her father's death, Leila was asked to recall him. Her answer was one paragraph long. It has become the single most widely reproduced quotation anyone in the Pahlavi family has ever given about any subject. She said that the last memory she had of him was the most painful. She said that when she understood the end was near, they would not let her into his room. She said that for a long time she had the feeling she had betrayed him by her absence. She attended the United Nations International School in Manhattan through the mid-1980s, transferred to Rye Country Day School in Westchester County, and graduated in 1988. She enrolled at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, the same year. She studied comparative literature with a reading focus in German and Scandinavian philosophy. She kept a Manhattan apartment during and after her university years with 2 dogs and a library of books in 4 languages. She divided her time between New York, Greenwich, Connecticut, where her mother spent much of the year, Paris and London. She worked on translations of the Persian mystic poet Rumi into French and into English at her desk in the evenings. She did not publish them. She worked with the Mihan Foundation, a charity her mother had established, and with the Iran Heritage Foundation in London, which preserved pre-revolutionary Persian cultural objects. She attended board meetings. She did not give speeches. In the summer of 2000, Leila walked the runway for Valentino at a haute couture show in Paris. The independent profile that followed placed her on what the paper called the tragic princess checklist. The 3 items on the list were thin, beautiful, and possessed of big, black, smoky eyes. A Spanish society magazine described her as a princess out of 1001 Nights. Her friend, the Persian-British author Shusha Guppy, in a profile for Harper's and Queen that same year, used a different vocabulary. Guppy said that Leila was lost. She said that Leila had never got over the trauma. She said Leila was warm and lovely, but sensitive. Too sensitive. In a letter to another friend in London the same summer, Leila made a joke about exile. She said that if she and her family were to be branded as exiles, the brand should be shaped like the letter O, doubled. The clinical picture is documented from approximately 1992 onward. She was diagnosed across multiple physicians in multiple cities with anorexia nervosa, bulimia, severe chronic depression, and myalgic encephalomyelitis. Her London physician, Dr. Mangad Iqbal, would testify at her coroner's inquest in July of 2001 that she had been addicted to the prescription barbiturate Seconal since 1992, the period of her second year at Brown. She checked into the Priory Hospital in Roehampton, West London, in late 2000 for a course of residential treatment. It was not her first stay at a rehabilitation facility. Her mother, in a sequence of the documentary The Queen and I, said that Leila had celebrated life more than her other children, but that the difficulties Leila had gone through had caused her to suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome and also an eating disorder. Farah added that in her generation they had no idea what that was. She travelled to Cairo in the summer of 2000 for the ceremonies marking the 20th anniversary of her father's death. Photographs from the visit show her gaunt. A friend present in Cairo recalled her pulling at the waistband of a loose dress and saying that she had put on far too much weight, that she had an extra 5 kilos on her, that she was like a pig now. She weighed less than 45 kilograms. In November of 2000, her maternal grandmother Farideh Diba died and was buried at Passy Cemetery in Paris, in the same row of plots where Leila herself would be buried 8 months later. By the spring of 2001, her prescription drug intake had reached quantities that the coroner would later describe as beyond dependent. The best available reconstruction, based on the police inventory of her hotel room and the inquest transcript, is that she was consuming approximately 40 tablets of Seconal and 30 tablets of Palfium or Rohypnol per day in the final weeks of her life. She had obtained prescriptions from Dr. Iqbal for more than 1,000 tablets of controlled substances in approximately 3 months. On the 5th of June 2001, a room service waiter named Louis Martinez, delivering a meal to her London hotel suite, found her on the floor with a telephone cord around her neck. She told him she had taken so many pills. Martinez called hotel security. A doctor was brought to the room. She was revived. She refused transport to a hospital. On the 6th of June, during a consultation with Dr. Iqbal at his office, Leila excused herself to the bathroom. Iqbal left the consulting room briefly to fetch eye examination equipment. When he returned, 5 prescription forms were missing from his desk. He did not immediately realize they had been taken. He would later testify at the inquest that he had not suspected his patient. The forms were never recovered. No pharmacy has ever come forward to say they were presented. The hotel suite cost £1,300 a week. The Leonard Hotel stood and still stands at 15 Seymour Street in Marylebone, London, in an 18th century Georgian townhouse that had been converted to a suites hotel in the 1990s. It is 2 blocks north of Marble Arch. Leila had been staying in suite number 15 on the top floor. She'd been there for approximately 3 weeks. On the evening of Sunday, the 10th of June 2001, Farah Pahlavi placed a call from Washington District of Columbia to her daughter's suite in London. There was no answer. She tried a second time. There was no answer. She placed a call to an Iranian exile in London named Huri Dallas, an old friend of the family, and asked Dallas to go to the Leonard Hotel and check on Leila. Farah also contacted a Harley Street psychiatrist who had been consulting on her daughter's care and asked him to meet Dallas at the hotel. The manager of the Leonard was alerted. At approximately 7:30 in the evening, London time, the manager unlocked the door to Suite 15. Dallas and the psychiatrist were with him. Dallas would tell the inquest 6 weeks later that Leila was on the bed with the covers pulled over her. Dallas said she thought Leila was sleeping. The doctor, Dallas said, told her Leila was dead. She was 31 years old. The Westminster Coroner's Court convened on the 25th of July 2001 at the Coroner's Court in Horseferry Road. The coroner was Dr. Paul Knapman. The inquest heard evidence from Dr. Iqbal, from Dallas, from the hotel staff, from the Metropolitan Police officers who had responded to the suite, and from the Home Office forensic pathologist who had conducted the post-mortem examination. The pathologist's findings were entered into the record. The concentration of quinol barbitone, the active compound in seconal, measured in the deceased's blood at the time of examination, was 27.3 milligrams per litre. The potentially lethal range begins at approximately 5 milligrams per litre. The concentration was, in the pathologist's testimony, approximately 5 times the potentially lethal level. Trace quantities of cocaine and of opioid painkillers were also detected. The police inventory of Suite 15 recorded 16 separate medications in the bedroom, 103 tablets of seconal, 96 tablets of palfium, 40 tablets of rohypnol, a smaller quantity of a third barbiturate, of a benzodiazepine, of a compound prescribed for migraine, of 2 stimulants, of a drug prescribed for blood pressure. The total quantity of controlled substances Leila had obtained by prescription in approximately 3 months, reconstructed by the inquest from pharmacy records, exceeded 1,000 tablets. No suicide note was found. In the drawer of the bedside table, the police recovered an undated scrap of paper on which Leila had written a short passage of French poetry and a single photograph, torn along one edge, showing her family watching television at Niavaran Palace. She was in the photograph. She was very young. She was on her father's lap. Dr. Natman returned a verdict on the 25th of July 2001 of death from non-dependent drug abuse. The verdict is a technical one under English coroner's law. It is not a finding of suicide. It is a finding that the deceased died as a consequence of the consumption of drugs that were not required for the treatment of a medical condition from which the deceased was suffering. Natman ordered a Home Office review of Dr. Iqbal's prescribing practices. He did not find the physician criminally liable. Farah Pahlavi, who had flown to London on the 11th of June and identified her daughter's body, issued a statement through the family's attorney that day. The statement read, in its final form, that for the past few years Leila had been very depressed. It said that time had not healed her wounds. It said that, exiled at the age of 9, she had never surmounted the death of her father, to whom she was particularly close. It said that she had never been able to forget the injustice and the dramatic conditions of the family's departure, and the wandering which was to follow. It said that she could not stand living far from Iran, and that she shared wholeheartedly the suffering of her countrymen. It said that above all, Leila loved Iran. It said that she had left them without seeing her country again. Her casket was transferred by Royal Air Force aircraft from Northolt to Le Bourget on the 15th of June. The funeral was held on the 17th of June 2001 at the Cimetière de Passy in the 16th arrondissement of Paris, on the slope of the Trocadero Hill opposite the Eiffel Tower. Approximately 3,000 mourners attended. An elderly Iranian man had stationed himself at the cemetery gates and handed each arriving mourner a single white rose, Leila's favourite flower. Muslim rites were conducted by an imam from the Grande Mosquée de Paris. Farah attended in black behind large sunglasses. Reza attended with his wife Yasmin. Farahnaz attended, silent, behind her mother. Ali Reza attended. Shahnaz did not attend. French royal descendants attended. Frédéric Mitterrand, the nephew of the former French president, attended. During the ceremony, Reza Pahlavi stepped forward to the edge of the open grave. He was handed a silver receptacle. The receptacle contained a handful of earth. The earth had been taken from Iran in January of 1979 at Mehrabad Airport by the Shah, bent at the foot of the aircraft stairs and carried into exile. The family had preserved it for 22 years. Reza scattered the earth over his sister's casket. Leila was buried beside her maternal grandmother. Her mother, in the memoir she would publish 3 years later, in 2004, wrote a single sentence about her failure to save her daughter. The memoir was called An Enduring Love. The sentence would become the most quoted line in the book. Farah wrote that she, it was said, could help a whole community expelled from its homeland, yet she was not able to come to the aid of her own daughter. 10 years later, the family would bury another child. At 2:11 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, on Tuesday the 4th of January 2011, a 911 call was placed from inside the row house at 141 West Newton Street in the South End of Boston. Officers of the Boston Police Department arrived within minutes. On the 3rd floor of the residence, they found the body of Ali Reza Pahlavi. He had died of a single self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 44 years old. The Suffolk County District Attorney's Office spokesman, Jake Walk, issued a statement the following morning confirming the finding of suicide. No suicide note was reported in the official response. No note has surfaced in any subsequent major news account. His brother Reza, in Potomac, Maryland, learned of the death before dawn and posted a statement to his website within hours. The statement read that it was with immense grief that he wished to inform his compatriots of the passing away of Prince Ali Reza Pahlavi. It read that, like millions of young Iranians, Ali Reza too had been deeply disturbed by all the ills fallen upon his beloved homeland, as well as carrying the burden of losing a father and a sister in his young life. It read that although he had struggled for years to overcome his sorrow, he had finally succumbed, and that during the night of the 4th of January 2011, in his Boston residence, he had taken his own life, plunging his family and friends into great sorrow. The Boston Globe reported on the 5th of January that Ali Reza had been receiving treatment for severe depression for at least a decade. Neighbours interviewed on the street spoke of a quiet man who had lived alone in the row house and had become increasingly withdrawn in his final year. His friend Farah Pahlavi, reached in Paris by the Associated Press, said that he had gone into a deep depression following the death of his sister Leila in June of 2001. She said he had never recovered. She said he had become a different person. Asked about the manner of his death, Pahlavi said, like an army commander, he shot himself. She said he was a very disciplined man. A memorial service was held on Sunday, the 23rd of January 2011, at the Music Centre at Strathmore in North Bethesda, Maryland, approximately 20 minutes by road from Reza's home in Potomac. Security was heavy. Several thousand Iranian émigrés attended. Getty Images photographed Farah Pahlavi in the front row in black, flanked by Reza and Farahnaz. Ali Reza's fiancée, Reza, was present. The ceremony was conducted partly in Persian and partly in English. Professor Ihsan Yashatar of Columbia, who had supervised Ali Reza's master's thesis, spoke about his student's intended dissertation on the pre-Islamic history of Iran. He said that the history Ali Reza had hoped to reconstruct would remain incomplete. Harvard University, at which Ali Reza had been a candidate for a doctorate in Near Eastern languages and civilizations for approximately 15 years, would announce within the year the establishment of a fellowship in his name. The Ali Reza Pahlavi Fellowship in Ancient Iranian Studies at Harvard, funded by his mother, continues to award annual support to one doctoral student, working in the field he had chosen for his life and had not lived to finish. The dissertation he could not complete became, in its absence, a permanent endowment for other scholars to attempt the work he had abandoned. His wish, according to his family, had been for his body to be cremated and for his ashes to be scattered in the Caspian Sea, at the place on the Iranian coast where he had spent summers as a child. Whether this wish has been carried out given the Islamic Republic's policies on the remains of members of the Pahlavi family has never been confirmed publicly. On the 26th of July 2011, approximately 6.5 months after Ali Reza's death, his fiancée Reza gave birth to a daughter in Boston. She had been 7 weeks pregnant at the time of his suicide. Farah Pahlavi announced the birth on her website in late July. The announcement read that the child shared the same name and the same title as her cousins. Her name was Iranian Pahlavi, and she was a princess. The child's full given name is Iranian Leila Pahlavi. She was named for her aunt, who had died in the Leonard Hotel in London 10 years and 16 days before her father's death in the row house in Boston. She would be raised by her mother in Boston and later in Washington, and would appear in occasional family photographs held by her grandmother, Farah. 4 Pahlavi children had been born to Farah and the Shah. 2 had died by their own hand within a decade of each other, in hotels and houses they had purchased or rented far from the country of their birth. One of them had left a photograph of her father on her bedside table. The other had left an unfinished dissertation on the empire his family had last ruled. Farah Pahlavi is 87 years old in April of 2026. She divides her time between an apartment in Paris and a residence near her son in Potomac, Maryland. She has outlived her husband by 46 years. She has outlived her younger daughter by nearly 25 years. She's outlived her younger son by 15 years. She has outlived her mother, her parents-in-law, 2 of her husband's sisters, and Anwar Sadat, the one head of state who stood beside her in Cairo when no other government would. Her memoir, An Enduring Love had been published in 2004, 3 years after Leila's death and 7 years before Ali Reza's. The sentence about her daughter, the one about not being able to come to her daughter's aid, had been written for a single grief. By the time the book appeared in paperback in 2012, the sentence applied to 2 children. She has not published a second memoir. She founded the Farah Pahlavi Foundation in Paris in the mid-1980s and has funded cultural and charitable projects through it for 40 years. She endowed the Ali Reza Pahlavi Fellowship at Harvard in her son's memory. She has funded Iranian academic chairs at several American universities. The work her daughter Farahnaz trained for and was never hired to perform continues in a diffuse form through the institutions her mother runs and funds. The scholarship her son was studying for and never completed continues in the fellowship that bears his name. A mother in her late 80s has built an apparatus to finish the work her children could not. In February of 2026, she gave an interview to the Israeli channel UN24 News from her apartment in Paris. Asked whether she believed she would return to Iran in her lifetime, she said that the regime was weak and unstable, and that her return would take place soon. She has been saying a version of this sentence for 47 years. In January of 1979, she told friends in Aswan that she would be back in Tehran by Nowruz. In the summer of 1980, before the Shah's death, she told a Cairo journalist that she would return within the year. In the early 2000s, she told Paris Match that she hoped to return before she died. In February of 2026, she said the return would take place soon. She lives near a cemetery in the 16th arrondissement of Paris, in which her mother and her youngest daughter are buried. She has not said publicly where she intends to be buried herself. If you have sat with me through 40-something minutes of a family's slow unravelling, I want to ask you something specific rather than something generic. Empress Farah has been saying for nearly half a century that she will return to Iran. She is 87 now. The regime that expelled her is, by the account of her surviving son, in the terminal phase of its own unravelling. If the airport opens tomorrow, should she go? An 87-year-old widow walking back through the gate her husband walked out of on the 16th of January 1979, past the customs desk onto Iranian soil in the year 2026. I would genuinely like to know what you think about that particular decision. Leave me a comment. The 4 granddaughters of the last Shah of Iran in April of 2026 range in age from 14 to 34. Noor Pahlavi, the eldest, is 34. A graduate of Georgetown and Columbia Business School, designated by her father as heir to a throne her father has proposed to abolish by referendum. Iman Pahlavi, the second, is 32, married to a Jewish-American businessman named Bradley Sherman in a ceremony held in the autumn of 2025. Farah Pahlavi, the youngest of Reza's 3 daughters, named for her grandmother, is 22, and Iriana Leila Pahlavi, the 4th granddaughter, the posthumous daughter of Ali Reza, is 14 years old. She was born in Boston. She attends an ordinary school in the American Northeast. She carries the name of an aunt she never met and the name of an uncle she will only know from photographs. Her grandmother, 87 years old in Paris, visits when she can. The bloodline continues. The throne does not. The country that produced them has not seen a member of the family in 47 years. The crown jewels of the dynasty remain in the vault of the Central Bank of Iran in Tehran, displayed to tourists, unlabelled, uncredited, backing the currency of the republic that replaced the monarchy. 5 children had been born to the last Shah. The eldest, Shahnaz, is 85 years old and has not spoken in public in 47 years. The second Reza is 65 years old and has spent his adult life representing a country that will not admit him. The third, Farahnaz, is 63 years old and has spent her adult life almost invisible. The fourth, Ali Reza, lived to 44 and died in a row house in Boston. The fifth, Leila, lived to 31 and died in a hotel room in London. 3 are still alive. 2 are buried, 1 in Paris, 1 in ashes the family cannot place. Their mother continues to say that she will go home soon. In 2004, 3 years after her youngest daughter's death and 7 years before her younger son's, Farah Pahlavi finished her memoir. On the final page, she wrote one sentence about her failure. She said that she, it was said, could help a whole community expelled from its homeland, yet she was not able to come to the aid of her own daughter.